Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this virtual meeting. Some of us are virtual, some of us are more realistic than that tonight, but Cindy, could we have a roll call, please?
Member Dennehy. Absent. Councilmember Maloney.
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Councilmember Worthington.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Troutman. Absent.
So the subject of this special meeting tonight is our drinking water revolving loan proposed. And Ryan, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick. As we discussed when we referred this ordinance to tonight's meeting, we do have a drinking water revolving loan fund in the amount of $6.6 million for improving infrastructure that's going to coincide with our 2A street replacement program. And for a full report, I'm going to pass it over to Leo Evans to talk about the details of what we're looking at tonight.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a loan program through the state. These are federal dollars that we're borrowing against, and the work is being done to replace water mains on 4 projects that we also have planned for 2A reconstruction. A quick recap of those projects. This includes work on North 9th Street from Mystic Avenue to Meadows Avenue, College Avenue from 9th to 15th, Harding Avenue from 5th to 9th, and Griffin Avenue from 4th to 9th. So with that, we have prepared an ordinance, a draft ordinance that would allow the city to take on this debt. And we have a draft of the agreement that would exist between the state power and water authority and the city for that. And I believe Kim Crawford is here with our bond counsel, as well as Ian from the Colorado Water and Power Authority, that they can answer a lot more questions related to anything specific to that agreement.
Thank you.
And Ryan, if I could jump in for a minute. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So as Leo said, Kim Crawford is with Butler Snow, who is the city's bond counsel. Ian Lawford is with the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority. I think I got that right. And really, there are 2 options this evening that we wanted to walk through with you in terms of 2 different ways to finance this, but one of them requires an emergency ordinance. And in looking through our files, I'm not sure the city has ever done an emergency ordinance. And there may have been one, but at least in the last 10 years, may have done one. But an emergency under the city's charter is a different way of doing an ordinance that makes it effective quicker and avoids a referendum period, which in order to get one of the financing stacks, the city would need to do so. So I was hoping that Mr. Lawford and Ms. Crawford could sort of go over the pros and cons of both of the approaches that are available, so the city council can ultimately decide if it is comfortable with adopting this ordinance as an emergency ordinance, which allows it to go into effect, again, more quickly, but avoids a referendum period and has the council making a legislative determination that this financing is in fact an emergency. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kim and/or Ian to walk through this, if they would.
I'm going to let Ian go through. Again, this is Kim Crawford, and I've been bond counsel to the city for a number of years. And agreeing with Corey, looking back in our records, I did not find any emergency ordinances. That being said, other cities and towns do this as an emergency. I mean, mostly because they want to get their water loans financed on time. And Ian can explain this as well, but the Water and Power Development Authority, I think it's twice yearly, has a bond program where they select certain issuers to actually participate in the Water and Power Development Authority's bond program. But since they have about 5 or 6 issuers in each of these programs, they have to do an official statement. They have to actually sell their bonds to the market. It's really time sensitive, and their timing and the timing of the other participants wouldn't allow for Canyon City to actually go through their 2 reading process and then a referendum period. It would push it out too long for them to be able to actually issue their bonds in a way that would meet the needs of the other participants. So that being said, they do have another option available to the city if you wanted to go that route. I will say that I'm working also with Granby, and it's not, again, it's apples to apples. It's not apples to apples. They are a statutory town. They only have 1 reading requirement, and they are going to do it as an emergency only, but they don't have any problems. Again, it's a little different circumstances, but that's what they're going to do, and I don't know about the other participants. So with that, I will let Ian explain the differences between the 2 programs, and I actually think they're both actually pretty agreeable. So in my opinion, I don't think one would be better than the other necessarily. It's just whatever you guys would decide to do.
Thanks, Kim. A nice overview. And hi, everyone. Ian Lawford, Assistant Finance Director with the Water and Power Authority. Yeah, so they're both good options, but one will allow a little more flexibility. We have a board meeting coming up end of April, April 25th, and that's why this is being brought up now. When your loan was approved by our board in March, it was originally 2 parts. We have federal funding that is called Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and that is going through as a direct loan. And direct loans for our programs are for those that are $3 million and under. And then you have another portion that we call a leverage loan. Those are for the larger loans that are above 3 million. And that was approximately 4.2 million to round your total package up to 6.6 million. For the leverage loans, those are the ones with the timing constraints. That's what Kim touched on. We have to go to market and do an official municipal bond sale. So there's a lot less flexibility with those types of loans, and there are strict timing deadlines. And then your leverage loan is also coupled with other borrowers in the same issue. We do that to split the costs of issuance between borrowers. But because of that, there's also other timing constraints that other borrowers have when they need to get their money. So for these leverage loans, we were looking to go to sale around the end of May to meet our timing deadlines. And that is why your standard procedure wouldn't meet that, because we have to have the loan approving ordinances effective before we go to bond sale, and also before we do an official and preliminary official statement.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, Ian?
Yeah, go ahead, Kim. You stop me anytime.
So Canyon City's, it's not the effective date, it's the referendum period. So your ordinances are effective, but under state law and under your charter, someone can file with a petition. They can, again, not likely, but you never know. And so even as bond counsel, we don't ever allow bonds to be priced before the referendum period expires, because if bonds were priced and then someone filed a referendum, then it would have to go to vote, and then you'd have to unsell your bonds, and it's just a huge mess, and it's really looks bad for the city. So we would not ever recommend that you do that until your referendum had expired. Your ordinance will be effective. It's just that there's the other extra 30-day referendum period.
Thanks for the clarification, Kim. That's good clarification. And if someone were to make a comment, we would have to pull you out from the bond sale, and then we would have to rerun your loan request back to our board as a large direct loan, which is the other option I'm going to touch on in a minute. But all of that means is big timing delays. So you wouldn't be able to get before our board until our June board meeting if that were to happen. So now I'm going to touch in the other option, which is doing all this entire loan as a large direct loan. We would have to bring it back before our board on the April 25th board meeting, but they already approved the package. And so it's more of just a semantics on how we're going to execute it. We have to do that because it was originally approved as a leverage loan, but we want to get approval to run this as a large direct loan. And again, the 4.2 million is not far off from our 3 million limit. So we've done waivers of large direct loans many times in the past before. Some benefits of running this as a large direct loan are you can approve it and do your loan approving ordinance with your standard procedures. You wouldn't have to do the emergency method. You could do it how you always do it. So you have a little more flexibility with that range. The other benefit is it's a set interest rate. If you were to do a large direct loan, the interest rate would be set at 3.25% for the 20-year term. With the leverage loans, we go to market and the authority receives an interest rate, and the authority is rated AAA, which is the highest rate you can receive for the market. The benefits with the leverage loan are that we give you a 15% interest rate subsidy reduction. So whatever rate we get on the day of the bond sale, you'll get that interest rate minus 15%. However, with the way the interest rate market is looking, at least for right now, it's hard to say in the future, the direct loan, the large direct loan would be a benefit to the city of approximately 20 to 30 basis points, which means the 3.25% would be approximately 0.2 to 0.3% lower interest rate if you were to execute those today. Now, I can't guarantee that, but at least right now, it looks like the direct loan would be a more favorable interest rate. Additionally, for these leverage loans, they have a 10-year call date. So what that means is you can't prepay or pay off those leverage loans until the 10-year mark or after. With the large direct loans, there's only a 3-year limit. So with the large direct loan, you can't prepay or pay off within 3 years. But after that, you're free to do whatever you please. And you can do partial prepayments, anything. It doesn't have to be a full payoff, but there's more flexibility with that. So to summarize, with the large direct loan, possibly a more favorable interest rate. There's a lot more flexibility in timing. There's more flexibility if you want to prepay or pay it off. And then also there's just generally less staff and admin time with the large direct loans. They're easier to execute. There's less strict timing requirements as opposed to the leverage loan. And then one other item I touched on briefly, but I wanted to reiterate, with those leverage loans, you have to pay a portion of the cost of issuance for that sale. It gets wrapped into your loan and it's split up amongst the other borrowers in that issue. But that is a slight cost that would be added if you were to go the leverage loan route. So I know it's a lot of information that I covered quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions. That's the benefits of going the large direct loan route. Benefits of going the leverage loan route would be you still receive that 15% interest rate subsidy I mentioned. It may not work out to a better deal, but if the market drops significantly, it could be a better interest rate than your standard direct loan. And that's generally it for your side for the benefits of the leverage loan. Now, there's a lot of items that we cover on the back end, but you wouldn't have to deal with it either way. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I see a hand there from Leo, is that right?
Yeah, Ian, I think I know the answer to this, but I wanted to ask for everyone else. Is there any difference to the city's principal forgiveness with either the direct loan or the leveraged loan?
No, that is locked in once your loan was approved, so that you are set with that 1.5 principal forgiveness no matter which route you go.
And I see Amy's hand.
Thanks so much, Ian, for that overview. Just to ensure I understand, we could do the full 6.6 million as the large direct loan. We don't have to split it between the two?
That's correct.
Correct.
Great. I thought that I had understood you saying that right now it was split, but we can go back and just do it all as a large direct loan. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, and if you choose to go that way, all we would have to do is add an item to our next board meeting coming up to end of April to approve that structure.
And I think I understood you to say that the funding comes from the bipartisan infrastructure law. Is there any concern with what's currently going on in our federal government that may not come to fruition, or that we may get wrapped up in not having those funds be given to us?
Great question. And part of the loan is from that bill principal forgiveness. The other part will come from authority funds, and that's what we'll sort out with Kim and bond counsel. But the part that is coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's guaranteed. We do not approve loan applications for funds that we do not have on hand. So we've already received those federal capitalization grants. They are in hand. We have them in our federal system that we can draw from any time, and those will not be clawed back or pulled back. So those are safe. The question would be for the 2025 and going forward, but that doesn't affect you. So everything you have right now is guaranteed.
Great, thank you.
And
welcome.
Ryan, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Leo, can you talk a little bit about the two options and the timing and how that may affect our projects for this year?
Sure. I would say, just to start, that either of those options would work fine for us. We are roughly 75% of the way complete with design on all 4 of those projects. So we were hoping to get those out to bids later this summer, which I think would work under either scenario. We should be able to get through this loan process and have kind of a notice to proceed sometime this summer, early fall, where we can get those bid awarded and then hopefully start construction yet this fall on a few of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Kim, I see your hand also.
Thank you. I just want to clarify with Ian, do you see any risk that your board would not approve them as a large leverage loan?
No, we've done many large direct loan waivers.
Direct loan, yeah.
And this one is right on the edge in any ways. And when we explain the scenario and how it would affect the timeline of funding for other borrowers, I don't think there would be any objections.
Thank you.
Good question.
So Emily, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks. And I wish I'm a real visual person, so for me, it would have worked better to have this all in front of me in writing to sort out the difference between emergency ordinance and not, and leveraged or direct loan. I guess I need a few bottom lines, if there are any, as far as, which, between the leveraged and the direct loan, what's the biggest risk on each one of those approaches, or biggest issue, if not a risk?
Biggest issue is timing for when you'll receive funding and how it impacts the other borrowers in the bond issue. If you don't do, if you go with the leverage loan and do an emergency ordinance, then that's also out of your historical purview for how you approve loan ordinances. The other bottom line is admin time and admin costs. So those are slightly increased if you go with the leverage loan. And then looking at the market right now, the large direct loan is slightly a better interest rate.
And Councilmember Tracy, I would just add that while I think it is very common for debt of this sort to be, or loans of this sort to be adopted by emergency ordinance, it is nonetheless the city council identifying that it's an emergency. Mm-hmm. And from an optics perspective, your community sees that that there is a quote unquote emergency. Different communities have different sensitivities to that. I tend to advise not to adopt an ordinance as an emergency unless it's a true emergency. And I understand that in the finance world, that might be the standard way of doing things, but some councils have a hard time articulating that this is a true emergency.
Right, I get that. If we decide that it's not an emergency and we don't want to go that path, then can someone paint that picture one more time of what it looks like if we don't do in the emergency ordinance?
Yes, if you don't do an emergency ordinance, it would be first reading on April 7th and second reading on April 21st.
And then the impact at the other end is, that pushes it to the authority's June board meeting. Did I hear that right?
No, if you go with that, if you go with your standard approval procedure and you go with the large direct loan, we will bring it back to our April 25th board
Okay.
meeting to approve the different structure. And then
Okay.
from there, we are flexible on loan execution. We'll work with your timeline.
Okay, thanks, that helps.
Kim, I see your hand again. Is that correct?
Trying to be polite. Yes, thank you. No, I agree. I think, again, going back, Canyon City, and I've worked with you guys for a long time, has not adopted an emergency ordinance. And as Corey pointed out, a lot of cities and towns have very different tolerance levels, and certainly it's just whatever you're comfortable with. One advantage I will point out, only because we work with tax exempt financings. If you do the direct loan with Water and Power, where you don't go through their bond program, your the money that you borrow is not subject to the federal tax rules. So you don't have any drawdown requirements. You don't have to file any, do any arbitrage rebate calculations, which the Water and Power Development Authority will do because it'll be their bonds if you go with their bond program. But they're also going to want you, the city, to represent that you're going to spend your bonds proceeds in a certain way at a certain time so that they can meet federal tax compliance covenants. You will not have that if you do the large direct loan. Also, if you do the large direct loan, you won't have continuing disclosure obligations, which you may not have anyway. I can let Ian go into that. But the SEC requires annual updates to be posted on this website called Emma for people who are borrowing and buying bonds of the Water and Power Development Authority. So they have to post audits. And if you have a certain threshold of a dollar amount in their program, and you probably don't, but if you did, you would have to do annual updates to them and then they would file it. So by doing it without going through the bond program and just going through your regular process with no emergency, you would not have to comply with federal tax or securities law rules, which in my book is a win, but you know, that's just me.
And then we have Amy, followed by Andrea.
Thank you. So Kim, could you clarify, does that mean that we wouldn't have to have the state review and approve the 4 projects that Leo mentioned, and we wouldn't have to finish within 3 years? Or do those provisions still apply?
You would still have to go through the state, and you might still have the requirement, Ian, I'm not sure about finishing it within 3 years, but it's not the federal tax rules have that requirement that you have to have an expectation to spend your bond proceeds within 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the Water and Power Development Authority has that separately, but maybe they do.
We just have it as a best efforts basis on the direct loan agreements. So very well said, Kim. With the leverage loans, we'll ask for a very hard estimate on what you'll draw per month and per year in order to meet those bond proceeds spend down requirements.
Okay. And Leo, from your perspective, any concerns with the requirement for state approval and needing to, I mean, it is our estimation that we will finish these 4 within the next 3 years?
I would say no concerns about state approval. We've worked with our state grant and loan coordinator all throughout this process, so he's well aware of the projects and the status and been involved in reviews. And I don't foresee an issue completing these within 3 years. As I mentioned, we have all of them nearly designed, and we are anticipating bidding them all this fall and then kind of phasing the construction out over the next 2 years was our intention.
Got it. And then I had 2 other questions. Is this cost already factored into our water rate master plan? I think the cap is 400,000, and if I'm recalling our meeting on Friday, you estimated 325 or 350.
Yes, I'd have to get the exact numbers, but the taking of this debt was considered in our water master plan and rate study.
Okay, perfect. And then could you just walk us through why we needed to have these special meetings on Friday and today? Like why this couldn't have been part of our regular meetings in March? Does it have to do with the timeline of when the state board considered the loan, or could you just walk us through that? Thanks.
We'll take that because at the time that we started this process, we were told that if we went through this process, we could have the original planned loan documents. And then when the authority looked closer, I guess, at the timing, they determined even with this expedited process, the emergency ordinance would still be required. But we learned that after we had already created this expedited timeline.
Sorry, I'm not following, Corey. What happened that meant that we couldn't have this like referral to the last vision committee or general government committee meeting?
Because we originally got information that if we went through this expedited process, we could get the original loan program we had been approved for. And then after we created this expedited process, we were told that was untrue.
So it wasn't really ready last month. So we couldn't have started a month earlier to back into this because all the approvals had not been received on the state end and stuff like that. So what they have to go through in order to make these things happen, and the Water and Power Development Authority board meetings hadn't occurred. So they had not made determinations. So as soon as they did, everybody got their acceptance letters, and then at that point, and Corey, very quickly identified that this was going to be an issue. So we did jump on it as quickly as we could and tried to get this process through as quickly as we could. But unfortunately, it still wasn't as quick as the Water and Power Development Authority would need.
Okay. From my perspective, it's not so much about what's to come. It's, having these types of conversations about whether or not we're not going to allow a time for a public referendum and to declare an emergency, not during our regularly scheduled meetings where folks are kind of more tuned in and hearing us for that transparency. So it's good to know a little bit more about the why behind that. Thanks so much. I appreciate all of you.
And I would just add that this allows for the normal 2-reading process if you go with the direct loan process. So everything will be just like any other ordinance. And as I indicated earlier, one of my concerns was whether council would want to consider this as an emergency and whether, council would believe it is in fact a true emergency.
Absolutely. And based on everything that Ian said, it sounds like there really aren't any cons to going through our normal process and just having a large direct loan. Thanks.
Andrea, I see your hand.
It's actually, yeah, it's Kathy, actually.
Okay.
Hey, my question, I think, has been answered. My concern was the fact that it might slow up Leo getting construction started, and apparently that is not the case. And so if it isn't bothering our construction department and everything that way, it makes sense perhaps just go with the direct loan. But I just wanted to make sure I was thinking correctly.
Yes, I think everything you said is correct. There is no concern from my standpoint, one way or another, which direction we go.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't think I see any other hands, although Leo, you've got your hand up. Did you have another comment you wanted to make?
I did. I was just going to ask Corey and Kim that if we are indeed to go with the large direct loan process, is there any change we need to make to the draft ordinance or the agreement?
I think the agreement will be tweaked just a little bit. Honestly, substantively, these loan agreements are are pretty similar to each other all the time. That they have their own forms that they use, that they've had, approval for years and years. So this ordinance that we had in front of you approves one or more loans. So at maximum amounts for a combined loan. So no, you don't need a revised ordinance. It would just be one loan and then, maybe it still will be two if you've got the principal forgiveness, but yeah, this loan would still work for either option. Or, I'm sorry, this ordinance would work for either option.
Thank you.
Okay, council, I think I don't see any other hands up for questions. And so and Ryan, correct me if I'm going astray here, but we've got really two questions, whether we want the large direct or the leveraged loan, and whether we want to use our normal process or go through the emergency process. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Corey, anything you would suggest there?
Yeah, I would just say that they're really one and the same question, because if you decide to go with the direct loan, that would be the normal process.
Okay, so Amy, I see your hand up.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion if there isn't any further discussion.
So, Corey, just for a point of procedure, this is a committee meeting. I don't think we're making any
wonderful.
motions.
Then
Correct. It's we're just a consensus.
Then I've got a thumbs up for a large direct loan.
And I guess I would say, does anyone disagree with going that direction?
Thank you for that. So that's the question in front of us. Does anyone disagree with going through the large direct loan process on our normal ordinance process?
Sounds good.
This is Jerry. I agree.
Me too.
Okay, this is Andrea. I agree.
This is Kathy. I agree.
And this is your chair, pro tem chair here, and I agree.
I think that's the direction that we need. Thank you very much.
Then I think that's all the business we have in front of us tonight.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that, and we are adjourned.